Hi everyone, welcome to the Action Movie Show, and it is actually Monday. Hi Manyninjas.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. How's it going?
So what did you think when you realized that it's actually a Monday and we're actually recording on the day we're supposed to be recording?
Well, first off, about time. Because whatever happened last week, everything was off. You'd put it on the wrong day, or several wrong days later, and then pandemonium runs that. It's so bad we're still recovering from it.
Agreed. So let's get right into this. We actually are recording on the proper day. We both watched the movie. I've actually slept more than 15 minutes. I'm actually recording from my living room, my glorious background. I'm actually sitting comfortably on my couch, having just rewatched the movie to get myself reacquainted. So I am back online here, and we're going to be talking about the 1990 classic, Total Recall, which there's a couple of things to talk about. So we're definitely going to do that. So, Many Ninjas, when you're ready, you want to get us started a little bit about Total Recall.
Oh, for starters, I just want to remind everyone Arnold Schwarzenegger is still totally jacked, and quite frankly, over muscular for even the role he's playing there as a construction worker when he begins the film. Next thing I want to bring up is technically as a small note here. Uh, this movie itself is based on a short story written by Philip K. Dick, which, depending on some films, you've probably heard things that are based off his work on more than one occasion, such as, I might as well bring it up here. This actual movie was supposed to have a sequel, would you believe it or not, based off another Philip K. Dick book called The Minority Report, which didn't exactly get panned out and turned out to a movie which was closer to the original name as well. Uh, I believe, off the top of my head, Blade Runner, otherwise based off the story, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, were based off this work. And let's see, what else to begin with this way to help set the tone for this particular movie. The director was Peter Verhoeven, whose last name I still can't pronounce at this point, but you've probably heard us mention it before when we talked about RoboCop. So that'll set your tone for where the action part and how deep, gory, and explosive the film will become as it goes on.
Absolutely, they did really get into doing. It's very. This is like the pre-CGI era. I believe they did. I think they did incorporate a little bit of CGI, but it was very, very relatively minor, especially compared to what will happen now and then what happened in the remake. I did watch bits and pieces of it, but I didn't get a chance to rewatch it fully, just so I could do a complete contrast, compare and contrast of it. But yeah, it was. You definitely have. He did not shy away from violence and a little bit of gore in order to get his point across. There was a lot of visual elements that stand out for this movie. So why don't you start us off with, what's your kind of non-spoilery review of Total Recall?
All right, as for a non-spoiler review, let's begin here. Generally, as an action film, it's actually a really great film. This film tends to get for the most part some really good praise, and I honestly feel it's well deserved just because it starts off with a bit of this odd premise there, just kind of with the director here, they include what I would expect kind of this some stuff that you expect at the beginning in order to really just help set the pace to get the rest of the movie rolling from there. So it doesn't really slow down at any point. In terms of everything, it's an action movie. So let's be honest, the plot's not going to be too overly woven in, but even that, considering actually it was a pretty good plot, or it was really well handled at points. So between that and of course the gratuitous violence that will go in the course of the film, I have nothing bad to say about
I would agree with that. It is an action movie that stands on its own as one of Arnold Schwarzenegger's best. It's kind of how it was one of those movies that he was starting to develop already a resume of films that are going forward and leading into making him the top action movie box office draw of the late 80s, early 90s. He had this big long run with, he had the Terminator movies, he had the Conan movies. He was he was developing, I believe at this point he had already done Predator. If I've got my timeline right, I think he had already done Predator at this point. Like I'd have to look. I could double check that, but the bottom line was at that point he was already building a body of work, and then Terminator 2 was still coming. It hadn't come yet, so he was basically on the path to getting to making himself into the overall box office draw that he was. I'm just looking here just so that I can keep track. Yep, Predator was in '87, Running Man is in '87, Red Heat in '88, Total Recall, and then after this same year, Kindergarten Cop, Terminator 2 would come in '91. So yeah, so he was right in the middle of this run of movies. As a standalone movie, I think plot-wise, actually, this one was pretty solid. Um, they actually had source material to work with. They weren't, as you explained earlier already in context, they weren't coming out of left field with this plot. They had this plot going, and it brought up this whole debate, which we're going to get in the bigger section here. We'll actually talk about a couple of things that struck us, but the reality is the big thing that stood out with this movie is he actually living the sequence you're looking at, or is it the dream? Is it part of the whole premise of the movie? Is you built in this idea that you can have memories implanted in you that would be just as real as the real thing. You would recall all these things, hence the title, Total Recall. But the reality is, if you are, they mention in the movie, one of the characters says you're the sum of your actions rather than your memories. But if your memory is fooling you, if you remember something in such a way, does that make it real, or is the fact you didn't actually do it mean that it's not real? And that's the overarching thought of the movie, if you want to get into that. And we've had 24 years basically to think of that, and that's one of the things that that has allowed this movie to kind of stand out a little more than even a lot of the other Arnold Schwarzenegger action movies. So in that regard, it definitely stands up a little bit more because even a movie like The Running Man, that's a fantastic action movie. There's no real message or plot behind it, and it doesn't give you any reason to really think beyond that point. Go ahead.
Hmm. All right, where to begin? Since we've now gone past the non-spoiler part of the evening, since literally this is being recorded at night, as you can probably guess from my less than bright surroundings. All right, going to the nitty-gritty, which Carl's already started on. One of the big questions here, which actually was made for this film and was not part of the original short story that this was based off of, was at the end, realistically, how much of this stuff actually happened? For the most part, by the sheer mention of the sheer introduction of the recall concept here, and how literally reintroduced with the actual initial attempt to implant the story in the fake memories, of course, supposedly triggering real ones, which for the most part, actually really match up with what the initial profile was. We have to ask ourselves at some point, okay, are these events actually happening? Since they are, for the most part, nearly matching tit for tat everything that had been listed on so early on, and even at the end of the film, we don't actually have a proper description or a proper signifier that this was actually real or not. In fact, the movie ends on a whiteout scene right before it hits the credits. Right after everything had come to, basically, you have the Douglas Quaid character basically do everything that's in there, save the planet, get the girl, take care of all the bad guys there, which basically matches the exact profile, what the secret agent profile was supposed to be, as part of the memory package deal. But with the whiteout at the end, we never get a proper confirmation. Was this all part of the fake game plan? Was this actually legitimate? We don't know, and thankfully, the movie feels concrete enough or just a satisfying story enough that for the most part, I don't imagine that the target audience cared too much. Only people who overthink this sort of things, like us.
Well, the thing is, as you say, they establish right early on in the movie. He's sitting there and they're developing a profile of, okay, we're going to create this memory for you. What do you want? You want to be a secret agent. Okay. So we're going to do that. What else are we going to do? Well, you want to, and even the guy that is basically selling him on this package, he's explaining. It's like, okay, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but you're going to save the girl. You're going to get the girl, save the planet, go into this, that, and the other thing, and as part of it, you also get to describe what you want your love interest to look like. A brunette who's athletic, who's this, that, and the other thing. You were able to choose her characteristics, and then inside of it, they managed to have a scene where the doctor, a doctor, walks in, and he walks in with Sharon Stone's character after initially talking to him, and he basically says, what's easier for you to believe? That you are having a schizophrenic episode leading from this thing, and that all of these things have been happening as you prescribed, or that you're a secret agent and part of an elaborate conspiracy to make you a construction worker and take you off. What's easier for you to believe? And it's the question that's brought up, and the story continues from there, but it does leave the question.
Did they mention one of the Manyninjas? Because technically, at some point or another, there were technically two of them where they have pretty much Sharon Stone's character, and I can't recall what the other actress's name was off the top of my head, but effectively the other one matching the description that was a part of the recall program. And pretty much just mentioned regarding the scene where, all right, do you think that all of this stuff is really happening to you, or that just something went wrong with the recall process, and this may be your last best hope to get out of this, as otherwise you might get stuck there for good? And probably the only thing I could say, which I might have an issue with, although technically I understand why they did in order to keep the story proceeding, and basically have it so it seems to imply in some part that it's more likely than not that it could be real, and that this is all really happening, as absurd as it sounds, is that when they looked at the doctor, they had a single bead of sweat running down the side of his face there, out his forehead, which would imply to Quaid's character there that this was actually, why would something that is not really there sweat? Why would something seem nervous unless this is more real than he wants me to think? Yep, pretty much. Kind of food for thought there. And realistically, if they had left that bit on kind of left it a little more ambiguous, they probably could have had a little more fun, or just made it a little more open-ended, or there are more questions going on there. But that's just me.
Well, absolutely. And sorry about that. I was actually going to switch back and then respond. It took me a second. But yeah, no, I agree. I think though that very much it still leaves it open-ended, because if you do want to overanalyze, you can point out that a lot of what's happening there, if it's based on memories, based on the ideas and concepts, well, the story doesn't continue in your story, your memory. If you could create your own story where you are a secret agent, where you're going through all the steps, well, there should be puzzles for you to solve. There should be clues. It should be a systematic thing. It's not just a straightforward, everything is laid out for you. You have to have opportunities to make decisions that then lead to consequences, then lead to more decisions. And that's how the story can go. So even the doctor guy having the sweat, which in turn convinces him that it's real, therefore he shoots him, and then the rest of the story proceeds. Well, that works with the idea that he wants to believe that it's real. He wants to continue the story, and that gives him a great opportunity to continue that story.
All right, I can see at that point that would pretty much, that was this line of thinking of why they had the sweat bead and basically allowed the story to continue. A bit of an open-ended choice there. Although realistically, if you have to have something that we basically implant memories, would you want to have this thing in there? The freaking Johnny Cab? Those things are creepy as hell. Especially in the crash scene where basically you have the thing burst into flames and still talking. That's nightmare fuel.
I blame the director for that one. I think he just wanted to creep you out. But what was great is it gave him the thing about it. I think the thing that as you point out, was the nightmare fuel, was that he completely ripped it out of its socket in order to drive the car later on in the movie, and the damn thing is still basically alive. It's still talking to you, and it's making facial expressions at you, and it's one of those things where if I was going to rip it out at first opportunity, I'd throw it out the window. Because that creepy little bastard is the last thing in the world you want to be looking at and listening to. But there was a lot of opportunities for like creepy little things that stood out in the movie. I would say one other thing that I found interesting in the movie was that comparing the new one to the old one a little bit, is that Sharon Stone was actually really good in this movie. Um, and then Kate Beckinsale did the same role in the remake. And it's kind of interesting because Sharon Stone was really in her prime at this point. So she was pretty much automatic money every time they put her in a movie at this stage in the game. And then you have Schwarzenegger, who was at the peak of his powers. So you had like two kind of really big solid names. Um, but it was interesting to watch, kind of their dynamic. And then she did a great job playing the role. Again, depending on what you want to buy it as, it I think her character kind of gives credence to the idea that the whole thing would have been a setup. Only because if you're really a construction worker, is that really the wife you're going to get necessarily? It seems like congratulations, you're doing very well. Mind you, at the same time, if you're a construction worker, Arnold Schwarzenegger probably doesn't look like too many actual construction workers you're going to find. So that part of it is true.
It's not so much that he's a construction worker, it's that he's basically described as the Ubermensch that you have going on here. There's nothing natural about his appearance there. It's like, yeah, it's kind of like how they joke about for the later Terminator movies. Okay, we need to send something back in the past that won't stand out, so we send in a giant bodybuilder type that towers over everyone and has a very noticeable accent. Yeah, that's the guy we're going to send in that's going to blend in with the surroundings. And that's basically the same thing that happened here.
Well, the thing is, if you pay attention, like depending on where you look, Schwarzenegger is about average height. He's not actually a guy who towers over necessarily anybody. Like, have you ever looked at, like, if you look at the scenes where he's running up the escalator, he's not towering over anyone. He's actually kind of like on eye level with the majority of the guys on that escalator as he's running up it. That's why he can kind of hide behind them and use the one guy as a human shield. He doesn't have to crouch down underneath him and then use him as a human shield. He can pretty much stand up using the guy as a human shield.
Speaking of the human shield, that was just incredibly hilarious scene, realistically. Oh, yeah. Well, unfortunately, you have this one guy that was an unfortunate victim of the circumstance just because he was the wrong place at the wrong time. And the circuit just grabs him and basically literally makes him a meat shield that somehow, despite being completely eviscerated by all the bullets he eventually gets shot with, still manages to absorb all the bullets, and still his corpse gets tossed in there as one last obstacle as he's getting to the top of the escalator and is trying to escape. It's basically, I think this must have been the distant future version of Alex Murphy or something like that, because they did the same shit in RoboCop 2. Oh, and speaking of product placements, because Lord knows they really love that in the original RoboCop film, clearly based on when this film came out, it's amazing how in the future you still have the exact same brands today, especially in the beverages there, in the exact same type of containers. You could probably set up a drinking game just saying, okay, how many brand names are still around here? Okay, there's Coca-Cola, there's Pepsi. I can think of they had like rows and rows of Barks, root beer, and a bunch of other stuff there. Although realistically, you saw a lot more Pepsi products, I feel, than Coke-related products. But still, my point is, light beer. Well, they didn't put the original brand there, but basically, I think it was Labatt Light Beer is what they were trying to really advertise there. The one thing they didn't put the first name on, and so on and so forth.
Listen, I have no idea what you're talking about. Everybody knows that product placement does not work in any way, shape, or form, and that no reasonable person would ever even consider doing something like that. It's just silly. I expect my royalty check. Just saying. Anyway, for me, using your point though, I'm saddened that you didn't mention it. Fujifilm. Fujifilm was all over that, and I very much enjoy that in the future, Fujifilm is a product that you can still see neon signs for. But like I said, overall, I don't really see how product placement is even a thing. Like, who falls for product placement? How does that even work? Really?
1 second, I'm just checking something on my my Google Nexus 5 here. I'm going to have to. I'm opening the Twitter app right now, and I'm going to start a message where I continue to this train of thought and imply that you're absolutely full of shit right now. Just thought you should know. So, oh, I gotta watch that video later. I'm sorry, where were we again?
I was hoping you could. I was hoping you could retweet. I'm probably going to actually. You know what? I'm going to do something. While I'm doing that, can you you know that was my point. Um, what else struck you about this movie?
All right, let's see. You have your blatant commercialism all over the place with all the brand stuff, which, once again, I found that really funny. I really should have jotted down in my notes exactly how many different brands I ran across there. Uh, of course, you have the fact that uh, Arnold's character is basically being played, or one of his foils is literally himself, played back in flashback videos, supposedly for the role of his original self being Hauser. Just to explain, basically, the original name of the quote-unquote spy character that Arnold ends up playing was I can't remember the first name, but basically the last name was Hauser, which is how he got referred to most of the time there. While the fake identity, which he portrays throughout most of the film, is referred to as Douglas Quaid. So most of the time, Quaid is trying to help pretty much help rectify the situation, but it turns out, or at least it's heavily implied, that originally he volunteered for the role in order to help sucker everyone in with the fake personality that ended up basically superseding the real one. And on a pretty much just covering the original story this is all based on. Dread, I had written down the name of this, but I don't have it on me right now. As I'm saying this, 1 second as I'll attempt to boot up the Google window myself in order to get that in there. Alright. Pardon me, as I'm just slightly off kilter on camera. I believe the name off the top of my head is We Can Recall That For You Wholesale. Something along the lines where the Douglas Quaid character was actually Douglas Quayle, which is pretty much kind of a lowly salaryman, a small businessman setup who went to a company that basically it was Recall. Once again, Recall was taken from the original source book, and to try to remember some stuff from Mars, but effectively the issue came up that it turns out triggering some real memories that he wasn't supposed to have. He gets hunted down for a bit, and once he realizes part of the truth of why he was, or why things triggered for them, he actually volunteered to go back under again, but told them that in order to set up the memories, or a better set of memories this time around, so he wouldn't be persuaded or have the inclination to go back to Recall and try to rejolt his memory yet again by accident. And at the end, it turned out it wasn't so much that he was hiding some secret on Mars about something that would make it more habitable, but the original story had it that he was actually visited by aliens on Mars, and the aliens were actually interested in invading Earth, but because they found his character so compassionate and kind, they decided for as long as this man lives, we're not going to invade Earth. So as an end result, once the government realized this is what happened, they realized, well, this man is realistically too dangerous for us to let him on the loose there. We have no choice to do so, because if we kill him, the invasion will come right away, and there'll be nothing we do. So as long as he lives, even if he doesn't know it, he's one of the most important people on the planet. That's how that story went for the most part.
Now here's a question then. You know, it's a very different take on it. It leads to kind of the same thing. Do you think that would that have worked as well for the movie though? Because in the film, I feel like the idea that you know you have a very defined bad guy. Because now, correct me if I'm mistaken. Speaking of the director, is the main bad guy here not the same guy from RoboCop? Like the guy who controls OCP, is it not the same guy?
I would actually ask you to look that up.
Let me check
Now
that
that you
out.
mentioned that he did look familiar, but I don't recall.
I'm going to look that up. I'm going to go back to you while I'm doing that, but I'm going to look that up because I think it's the same actor.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the director used some of the same actors there, just because he liked working with them in the past there. But realistically, if they had stuck with the original story, it would have been a lot more cerebral to it, depending on how they played it out. But obviously, Arnold would have not been a good pick for that particular film if they went the original story on there. And speaking of original stories and their adaptations, like I said earlier, they were actually supposed to make a sequel based off, well, this film that was based off another Philip K. Dick story, The Minority Report, in which, that case, the future-telling forces in The Minority Report that would have been based off a sequel of Total Recall would have been the Mars mutants who could see the future. And that's how they were going to work that in and tie it in for a sequel. But basically, the whole thing kind of washed out. I think Arnold also had some other engagements with films yet to come for that bit, so that squashed that. So that went into development hell for a while until they basically retooled a bunch of things, and it came out a little closer to the original source as Minority Report. And that's the story of the sequel that never was for this particular film.
Yep, that's fair enough, and I think it's fine. To be honest, as for the way this one was done, I don't know if a sequel right away would have been that necessarily. I don't think it was necessary, and I'm not even sure if it would have worked out that way if they had wanted it to. For reference point, I did look it up. He was Dick Jones in RoboCop 3 years earlier.
Yeah, I could kind of see that happening, just because, quite frankly, he was good in that role as well. Which in his original role he was effectively kind of tied in there is like the character or the general actor is used to playing a kind of more family roles, pleasant roles, and basically playing an absolute bastard for the villainous role. And it turns out he was actually did such a good job of it. Quite frankly, he could do anything he wanted there, and so realistically, why not have him do another similar villain role, although slightly more nuanced. Maybe less, depending on how you look at there, depending on the motivation, really.
Well, I think as a character, he was more nuanced for the majority of the movie. For the majority of it, he's there. He's giving instructions, giving orders, but he's kind of in the background for the majority. It's only at the very end that he really starts to play up, his really, really, really villainous side. Because, at the beginning of it, he's chasing after Quaid, but he doesn't want him dead. He's giving his henchmen instructions. He's like, I don't want him dead. If I had wanted him dead, I would have told you to kill him, whatever, as the case is. But yeah, it's only again, depending on your interpretation. If you choose to do it as the Dream, he's kind of a really complex character because he plays a strange way of going into it, because it all ends up playing together that in a way he's helping him out, getting him from point A to point B. So if it's real life, it's a really, really cerebral play. It's playing the pieces on the chessboard in a very elaborate ruse. I don't know if you could hear that or not, but
Yeah,
that was a train. Were you able to hear that?
Not the train, no.
Oh, no, you didn't hear that?
Well, not the train that way. The train outside, as the track passes both ways, so I heard that from out there.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's fair enough. But if you think about it as that way, it's more cerebral. It's a really, really, really elaborate ruse. If it's the Dream, then again, it's still a really elaborate ruse, but it's a figment of a very active imagination.
All I know is, at least, it wasn't the real villain of this film, just due to sheer creepiness, the Johnny Cab. I don't like that thing.
So you're saying the Johnny Cab is the real villain of this film, the real one? Well, Johnny Cab did get his in the end.
I think the only reason that Mars didn't have an atmosphere in the first place, the Johnny Cab scared the original aliens away with its sheer creepiness.
Hold on. The Johnny Cab was not on Mars, though. The Johnny Cab was in the other planet, because I think he starts off on Earth. Johnny Cab is on Earth. On Mars, you've got real taxi drivers. Ha!
The Johnny Cab left Mars to terrorize everyone and chase after Quaid to try to finish the job.
This is going to be your thing for this episode, isn't it? You and the Johnny Cab. I suppose it is a small step up from you randomly talking to the stuffed bear ninja thing. And it's a small step. But at least we have blatant shillage in this one. I won't show the label this time, I promise. But the label's on the other side of this. No, I'm not going to do it. No, but that's 100%. I'm just trying to think. It's interesting and it's weird in a way because I think the majority of the discussion really is about the idea of whether it's real or not. You could literally talk about that for a really long time and break down pieces. Um, I'm just trying to think. For me, almost a secondary play to the movie itself is the fact that almost that you go through this elaborate thing, and in the end, the thing that the main character, the main villain, I should say, is trying to keep out is this technology that he doesn't fully understand necessarily, but technology that apparently has the ability to create atmosphere on Mars, which in effect would ruin the sort of the setup he's got going on.
Generally, yeah, the whole technology thing is a bit on the screwy side there. Speaking of which, no, you can't escape me. Getting back to the point here.
The best part is that you're doing it and you're still in the shot.
Seriously?
Yeah, you're on the edge of the shot.
No, damn you. How about now?
Now you're out of the shot.
There we go. Okay. As I was saying before, I was rudely interrupted there by reality. Generally, no, you pretty much, the whole thing is basically, yeah, we're just going to take these giant heat things and just melt a bunch of ice, because apparently the core of the mountain is ice. Who knows exactly how that works here? I should really add some stick things to this. And then, by melting all that ice, we're going to release all the oxygen inside, and suddenly, atmosphere everywhere. Which, somehow, despite the fact it seems completely asinine, manages to work anyway. Only now they have a new problem. Everywhere that is open is filled with shattered glass everywhere. There's a million cuts there, get some damn brooms, everyone. And now we have to rebuild some windows realistically, because with that atmosphere, holy crap, thunderstorms everywhere. And how are we going to protect ourselves from that now?
I'm very tempted to just leave the shot on you to see how long you can crouch down holding the freaking bear up.
This recording will not last that much longer if you wish to do that. A few minutes, perhaps. But otherwise, this will end badly.
All right, I'm going to come back to me now. I could really have entertained myself for a while. Unfortunately, I'm out of beer, so I'll move on. Yeah, the whole atmosphere thing. That part of it was kind of like, it made me laugh, but at the same time, it made me go, if you want to put a point for the dream argument, I don't know if science necessarily works that way. That okay, we'll put some heat rods. Effectively, it was using kind of the technology almost of a reactor. And I think they called it the reactor anyway.
Yeah,
so
they
were
refer to it as a giant reactor of sorts.
Yeah, okay. So you're using the kind of the technology idea of a nuclear reactor. You've got these rods that are going down into into rock or into water or something.
Ice. The whole planet of the whole core of the planet was ice, believe it or not. That's what they explained it as.
Which doesn't make any damn sense if you know how planets work. Like using in the Earth's core, that's hot. You're not going to get ice in the core and then heat all over the surface. But anyway, so we're putting rods in ice that apparently manages to live on Mars, ice inside Mars, even though the outside is hot as hell. So you got the rods go into the ice. The ice causes all the steam to come up. It all comes into the atmosphere. It creates thunderstorms. It creates cloud cover. It creates this, that, and the other thing. And suddenly you've got real atmosphere. You look out at the sky and it's a blue sky, and with the clouds around it, and you've got air everywhere. And as you said, there's shattered glass everywhere because the sudden release of oxygen is like a sonic boom everywhere, but of oxygen and air that suddenly pushes pressure against all the glass, shatters everything, and leaves you with people shocked that suddenly there's this atmosphere on Mars. And that leads us into the closing sequence where you're kind of like, okay, So now you've saved the girl, you've got the girl, you've saved the planet, you've accomplished everything, you defeated the bad guys, but now we're going to end the movie because we don't really know. And even at the end, the character alludes to it. It's like, I just had a horrible thought. What if this is all a dream? And she basically says, well, kiss me before you wake up. But again, you've left it open. Was it a dream? Was it reality? Was it a ninja speaking through a stuffed bear ninja? Like, what is it?
The answer is they didn't make the sequel for a reason, because that would have actually forced a direct answer. So hindsight, that was actually really clever not to do it in the end. As for whether any of this stuff is real or not, the box office is not real enough to make a sequel after all, although it did make a lot of money, but they decided not to do that, so the answer in this case is relatively irrelevant. But let's see. Okay, we've covered the... I'm hard pressed to think of anything we haven't really covered at this point. Product placement by Taco Bell. Probably funny enough because Taco Bell was the only thing I hadn't seen on there. Whether or not this was just a giant dream sequence enough, which they never bothered to answer. Arnold Schwarzenegger is still the buffest guy in the movie in general, which...
Questionable pseudoscience, which I still question.
That's the science that... Well, we just say science. Is like, how does any of this work? Aliens. You're already on a foreign planet? Aliens. You got mutants. You know what? We don't want to think about it too much. We'll just leave it at that. I'm not sure if this is... It wasn't really until after the film. This is kind of the start of the one-liners. Or kind of an early edition of the one-liners by Arnold. But
No, in Terminator you've got a lot of one-liners.
But how many by Arnold himself?
The only person who gives one-liners in Terminator is Arnold Schwarzenegger. Hold on a second. I'm going to come back to me being incredulous. The only person who gives one-liners in Terminator is Arnold Schwarzenegger.
It's just funny because he's the most robotic character, literally, in the movie.
I'll be back.
Yeah, I'll be back was obviously the first real notable one that anyone can think of in terms of Arnold lines. And after that is when they basically let it like, you know what? It's interesting to see the man with the Austrian accent talk. We're going to give him more opportunities to talk and work things out from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, when I go look at the, I've been using my friends at IMDb most of the time just to help me out. But yeah, no, the thing is, if we look at it, before this one here, we've got your Conan movies, which doesn't really have a lot of one-liners, but you've got Terminator, you've got Commando, you've got Raw Deal, Predator, The Running Man, which has a ton.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to review The Running Man, no doubt, but definitely in The Running Man.
Yeah, okay. I forgot that The Running Man did indeed come first. Okay. I rescind my statement then.
Yeah, I would say there's more than enough there in the realm of one. Running Man alone. Pretty much every time he kills somebody in The Running Man, excuse for a one-liner.
After he kills someone, while he's killing someone, before he kills someone, I'm just standing here and no one is saying anything awkwardly. I'm going to say something funny.
Exactly, I would agree. So yeah, no, we definitely got that in. We took care of that business, and hell, we got our own product placements in. Royalty checks forthcoming.
I hope so.
Maybe.
Let's see. I think honestly we've covered the film at this point. It's a really good film, but it's kind of straightforward, except for a few points here or there. So. Let's see. I'm
going to come back to me for 1 second. You realize this is the film that we've covered in action movies. This is the film with probably the most subtext and potentially analytical, material. And and we gave it. I think we've probably done about as much analysis as we did for Missing in Action.
Well, the problem is, Missing in Action was a terrible, horrible movie, which we spent most of the time insulting it and the person that starred in it. But in this one, it's a good movie. It's easily a very critically acclaimed movie and everything. But there's not really much to be made fun of. It's not nearly as many. I wouldn't say that it isn't as one-liner heavy as Arnold's other films up to that point, even, much less anything that came after it. It's a good film, and that, aside from talking about some of the stuff that helped build it and some of the certain themes behind it, it's kind of more cut and dry on that one, believe it or not. I think we spent more time last week talking about Universal Soldier where there wasn't as much going on as this one, but mind you, some of us were either sleepy or inebriated, depending on how that woke. Then I don't know. There's only really one thing left to do, I guess. Do you know what that is, Carlos?
No, what is that?
It's very simple. Let's see. More flight.
Yep, pretty much. That's all we got. So no, that's pretty much it. The only thing we can say critically is that, quite frankly, your movie was too reasonably solid. You bastards.
Yeah, it's good enough we are able to talk about it, and we have really nothing bad to say other than a few small nuances here and there. But that's the problem. It doesn't leave us much more to say other than clearly kind of an end of review thought here, being would I recommend seeing it? Yes, basically any day of the week is a good week to see Total Recall. The original one definitely stands the test of time as pretty much a solid film for the most part. I personally can't speak too much about the remake because I haven't seen any of that. Carlos has only seen bits and pieces, basically what he's described here. So on his part, he'll be able to give more of a review on that one. But in terms of the original, I'd say, is it worth watching? Yes. If you can get a solid copy of it, absolutely, go nuts. It's worth the purchase.
Well, I'm going to come back to I'll agree with that. The truth is, it's not hard to get a solid copy. There's two Blu-ray versions of Total Recall. One of them has the better remaster than the other one. I ended up watching my copy on Netflix because I was curious to see how it would look. It actually looked pretty good. I thought, especially the opening sequence when they're on Mars and it leads into him having a dream, which ends up being a nightmare where he wakes up, and then the first scene with him and Sharon Stone talking, we establish basically what's going on with them as a married couple. Overall, though, it looked pretty good. There was some graininess in the darker scenes, but that's because we're using, even though it's 1990, the movie, it was filmed at probably in 1989, so we're still using some cheap 80s movie stock. They used a lot of cheap film stock, which there's going to be some graininess, which is fine. It's not, you're not expecting the world. Realistically, though, you can probably get the Blu-ray for under $10. If you go over that, I'd be surprised, but it's worth $10 even if that's the case. If it's $9.99, buy it anyway. But you should be able to get it a little cheaper than that, especially on when we're getting close to the Christmas season. There you go. Regular time, $10. It's 100% worth it. It's a classic that has a space on the wall. If you're gonna put your movies on the shelf, that's a movie that is worthy of a spot on the shelf, without any doubt. So that'll be my end of thing review. I would say the Netflix version holds up. So if you got your Netflix subscription and you can watch it on there, that's great. Otherwise, buy the Blu-ray. You can watch it anytime you want. So even if Netflix's licensing deal goes out with that, you've still got a copy. It's nice to have a physical copy sometimes, without a doubt. So why don't we do this? I haven't even told Manyninjas yet, but we've also got to talk about what's going to happen next week, which hopefully, again, we'll be able to work on Monday. Hoping. Assuming everything goes according to plan, what we're going to do next week is we're going to review another film from another kind of a classic film, not nearly as good as this one in terms of plot and thought process behind it, but a movie that I definitely want to see. But before I do, I'm going to introduce that. But before I do, why don't we do this? I'm going to go grab it, and while I'm doing that, Manyninjas, shamelessly plug your stuff.
All right. Well, as I mentioned, I'd say last week loosely on account that it was realistically Friday, so really a few days ago, I can actually confirm a few things. One, I'm still in the process of recording a kind of small, kind of a play series or small recording set based around the a NES title, Mega Man 3, to cover a few odds and ends, basically some tips and tricks about some of the boss battles for that. I'm still in the process of recording a few of the latter ones for the starting age. Mostly just because it turns out two of the ones I was thinking, it's like, okay, there must be like a pen or something to help. It turns out, no, they're entirely random, which I learned the hard way. Uh, so I'm recording that, and that should come up in the next day or so. The reason I say the next day or so is because technically tomorrow afternoon I'll be busy for part of the afternoon. Uh, After working out something for the past while, the official recording date has pretty much now been put down. That I think, give or take around, I'd say between 5 to 6 p.m. Roughly, I think we're Eastern Standard Time, I think. Am I correct on that one, Carlos?
I'm sorry, repeat the last part of that?
What time zone is this in? I can't think of. I can't remember.
Eastern Standard Time.
Okay, the around between the 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I believe. I will actually be doing a recording over at AMS World, which is pretty much a retro game shop area around Toronto, Ontario, and I can't remember that. Toronto, Ontario area, where I'll be working with Daniel, otherwise known as D Tysonator, who runs a lot of the streaming stuff for that particular area, covering the RoboCop NES stream that we've been talking about, working on since last year before he got distracted with too much Battletoads on the brain there for a good long while. And it's finally going to go down tomorrow, I believe. The address, it's going to be brought up in the description here, but I believe the address off the top of my head is Twitch TV, so twitch.tv/AC Games Online. I'll be the absolute definite version will be in the description for this particular video when it goes up. And of course, I'm still working on odds and ends for my usual stuff on Retro Ninja Gaming, for my pretty much my vintage gaming series on there, and stuff for my YouTube channel, which for updates and more videos, it's easier to check out. I am Manyninjas.com, and of course, if there's anything that goes on around my world, you'll probably see a more immediate update on my Twitter account at Manyninjas.
Beautiful. So I'll quickly state for myself, it's at Carlos Alcazar 2, where I will make updates for different things and also make sarcastic comments occasionally because that's fun. CarlosAlcazar.org, where I'm going to put the links up. I've been very tardy on the links for that one. I will take some time tonight actually to update it with the most recent videos, including this one. I will put the Twitch address in the description for what Manyninjas is referring to. Now, as promised, I did want to mention what next week's movie will be. So, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do this. Cobra by Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of lost.
Arnold Schwarzenegger was not in this movie whatsoever. The only time he may have had, I'm trying to remember if. No, it was the exact opposite. No, Arnold Schwarzenegger has absolutely no association with this movie. It is Sylvester Stallone and Sylvester Stallone 80s hair, which is brilliant. Cobra, Stallone, not Schwarzenegger. I need another beer. So that'll be the movie that we're going to cover next week on Action Movie Show. So any last thoughts then before we take off, Manyninjas?
I too can make things appear from off screen. Behold. This is the only prop I had on hand right now.
Going back to you now.
We need to think of a new shtick for next week. I think I'm losing my mind. More so than usual. You have to be kind of crazy to be wearing the ninja mask in the first place. You should try this for a change.
No. But, you know, for the record, there is no way you're coming up with a new shtick because, quite frankly, that would necessitate effort. And I'm only 50-50 on, let's be honest, you just kind of hang around the house dressed up as a ninja.
That's not necessarily true. I also wander the streets randomly as a ninja. It confuses the hell out of people. Trust me on that one.
And with that, we're good for this week on the Action Movie Show. Come back next week where not Arnold Schwarzenegger, but Sylvester Stallone. There we go. Cobra. So that'll be the movie. As you can see, it's still wrapped in the plastic. I've actually seen the movie a bunch of times, but I haven't actually cracked open this copy, and I will be cracking this one open and rewatching it to reacquaint myself. If if you happen to have a little time this week, feel free to watch it ahead of time and then join us when we review this film. So for myself, again this week, and Manyninjas, thank you for watching the Action Movie Show. I'm gonna go refill my beer, and until we see you next time, enjoy yourselves and have a great evening.
Take care, ladies and gentlemen, and see you next time.